The main course of today's discussion, which is kind of robot hitchhike. So after doing the culturebot project, we saw that as kind of like this, very simple kind of cultural participant. So the idea that, could you actually make an autonomous machine that would somehow participate in culture, rather than, a manufacturing robot or some kind of helper robot. Something that could actually go on an adventure, is what I like to say. So this is a little bit of Photoshop activity. I actually did throw this together in my basement. It's a camera tripod, garbage can, some rubber boots, just a picture of some gloves and a pool noodle, cake saver for a hat. And started to pose the question. And talked about it before we even, kind of got much farther than this. Around that time, somebody from the Globe and Mail heard through a friend that we were planning on this robot hitchhiking. And before we knew it, there was an article in the Atlantic magazine. So we kind of, just the idea was stimulating enough. We hadn't even done anything except that. We started to get phone calls from the press, and it just kind of took off from there. So we kind of had to do it once we opened our mouths. One of the things, that I think about robots myself is, we send them off to do dangerous things. Go to a hostile or uninhabitable environment, say Mars, a lunar rover, a Mars rover. Or like a space probe, send them into minefields for diffusing bombs, military stuff, undersea exploration, even to inspect the insides of nuclear waste storage facilities. Kind of risky in the culture, which is this idea of hitchhiking. There's that element. There's also the element of kind of adventure by proxy, of the space probe, of that you can follow. People are following the Mars rover, and or Chris Hadfield's most recent stay on the space station was an adventure by proxy for a lot of people. They could participate, communicate, and kind of partake in an adventure without, being in that special position of being the actual individual who did it. Here are the actual crime rates. This is US from 93 to 2011. We live in a much, much safer world by all measures now than 93. And this general trend, if you could go back to the 60s, it follows pretty much the same kind of decline. However, if you ask most people, this is an American study, every year since 1992, Gallup has been asking people, has crime gone up? Is there more crime this year than last year? And every year people say yes, right? And so the number of people is only 10% of people think it's declined. And 45% of people think it's gone up. Now, you think about the experience of children these days. When I was young, the message was, get out of the house and don't come back until the lights come on, And usually you kind of had a grace period of about an hour after it was totally dark. These days, it's not unusual for parents to escort their 12-year-old 3 houses down to go play at a neighbor's. They're like exponentially safer today, statistically. But there's a media perception. I think media-induced perception. We are hardwired cognitively to pay attention to things that go wrong. which is why we love gossip. Gossip has, kind of probably a very valuable evolutionary role. It helps to kind of point out to us vicariously. We don't have to go through the trouble of making the mistakes. We can hear about other people's mistakes and learn from them and hopefully avoid the social misstep ourselves. Interestingly enough, in Canada, we have a completely, kind of a culture, there's a big cultural difference between the US and Canada. If you ask people, this is 1991 to 94, our perceptions of personal safety are relatively high, and they haven't changed that much. What I find interesting is against this background where most of the citizens are going, well, things are pretty good. We feel pretty safe in this country. You can make a lot of political hay these days by kind of employing fear in the culture to finance certain pet agendas. Okay, so there's actually I just want to go back there. So. Part of this whole hitchBOT thing was kind of wanting to touch that nerve on perceptions of public safety. How do we feel about the stranger among us? How do we feel about this kind of adventure, which maybe doesn't have a definite set of points that that we can't really script ahead of time to know what's going to happen. Something that may have this element of risk. And then we set about it and immediately, carried on with my Photoshop and started asking, kind of visual questions, right? If we are entering into a future where we do have autonomous machines that we can let loose, and we're already experiencing this now with drones and, say, the Google car, an automatic car. What happens if it gets in an accident? What are the legal implications? So this is one of the concerns I had. If we set this, especially something that's going to be on the highways, what if somebody is distracted, drives off the road, or somebody hits it, or is injured getting out to pick it up? And if any of you have ever run into the grumpy U.S. Customs agent, could I wind up on the Homeland Security list for sending a drone, into the U.S. It has GPS, it takes pictures, it reports back, it records stories. So that was a concern. Legally, could, and all those, those kind of, worst case scenarios caused me to ask the question, can I disown something, right? Like we have incorporation laws that indemnify individuals, from, legal consequences if their company does something bad, which actually works out to most of our disadvantages most of the time. But, if could I disown this? And I actually talked to a lawyer. And he said, no, you can't. You make it, you're going to be responsible. So anyway, we set out, the development thing, we kind of kicked it off. We decided that we were going to go coast to coast. Victoria was going to be the destination. We had, of course, an amazing team to do this. Cullen, this is Cullen here, and Cullen's parents here are in the audience. You can put your hand up. Thank you for bringing Cullen into the world. Cullen and his colleague Dominic are in the engineering program at McMaster. And they were responsible for most of the mechatronics. So the assembly of the bot, like figuring out how the charging systems are going to work, the various power supply, helping us with the computer technology on board as well. That's my partner, Frauke, on the upper side there. We also had other multimedia students at McMaster working both on the web design and filmmaking, language development for the dialogue model, and then a large social media team. Mostly the social media team is coming out of Ryerson to manage the Twitter and traditional media. And we're also working with Frank Ruddix, who's at the University Health Networks, University of Toronto engineer who specializes in speech recognition. He was interested in the project. He works with people with CP, developing speech recognitions for people who have difficult speech. And the challenge of speech recognition in noisy environments, like cars, was of interest to Frank, so he joined in as well. Moving along, I'm going to kind of get into the building and then the adventure. This is a shot probably from Colin's house, I guess, kind of getting the pool noodles and glued into the armature and getting the boots attached. Inside hitchBOT, this is why I like having brilliant students. At one point, we were saying, okay, hitchBOT is going to need a camera, it's going to need a little processor, it's going to need some memory. Oh yeah, we better order a GPS unit. Oh yeah, we need a microphone. And I think it was Colin at one point said, "How's a tablet?" You know? Oh, thank you. We were thinking it might be cheaper to, just to assemble it, but it is actually cheaper to use a tablet. So that's a Asus Galaxy. It takes a 3G chip, so we've got internet connectivity. We also worked with one business, which is CleverScript. They do these kind of dialogue bots. So they mostly can live on the internet, on your website. You can ask them questions. They can interview people. They can collect data. Arduino, this is a tiny little processor that can do, we've got some movement in the bot. It has to have one moving part, technically, to be a robot, and a tool. So hitchBOT's one moving part is the arm, and the tool is the signal. It's funny, my dad is 90, and I took hitchBOT to, he lives in a senior's home, and I gave them that definition of a robot, that it needs to have at least one moving part. And one of my dad's old fart friends said, "There's a lot of us in here like that too." So the kind of, main components, lots of wires inside there, and ends up looking like that. And tape, this kind of stuff was our best friend, keeping things from getting tangled up. We also had to do these sessions where we were working on the language modeling. It is like writing a play, and John Bandler will know this, anticipating what people might ask the bot, and then developing answers, but then also identifying keywords to be recognized and replaced. So this is actually what this dialogue modeling software would look like. You can run this on a regular spreadsheet, and then you have to import it up. It gets compiled. It's read as a CSV file, for those of you who know. Any of these kind of double bracketed sections are hyperlinks to another list of phrases. So our you would refer to a list of phrases to say we, us, they, he, she, so basically substituting pronouns. You can have substitutions for adjectives, verbs, etc. And this is how the word recognition listens for key words and key phrases, and then kind of reaches into its database and pulls out the best answer that it can. We also used what we call good old-fashioned artificial intelligence. As some of you who are familiar with this field know that there's always arguments going back and forth between what constitutes intelligence and how to go about that. Human beings, we tend to distribute our intelligence into our environment. We encode it. For example, we know how to drive, mostly without much conscious thought, following lines, understanding technically that we should be on the right unless we're in England. Obeying lights automatically. I think your foot probably starts moving for the, for the brake, just with that first flash of orange before you even have a chance to think about it. Or some of you hit the accelerator. But yeah, so we wanted to make it kind of an infographic that told people where to place the bot. This is, we're finally ready, and that's my daughter. So we had to drive the bot from Port Credit, deliver it to Halifax, and she never wants to see it again. So, it talks constantly, and we actually had a reporter in the car with us who came up from New York, or I was actually here from Germany. And he wanted to follow along, and I don't think he wants to spend any more time with it either. So, this is the day of our exhibition at NASCAD. So we had an opening. The opening was attended by about 20 people. Some of them were friends, some of them were media, and some of them, were people who worked at the gallery. So only a few people actually came to the exhibition. Where we are here, it's exactly 20 feet away from the inside of the gallery. So this is Saturday. Frauke and I are in the gallery with the bot, and you could hear a pin drop. There's nothing happening. Big signs, they did a screen print to cover the whole window. And we said, well, let's go outside. So we just got an extension cord and put it on a bench, and this is only part of the crowd. It just keeps going. And then there's people running down the street, to talk to it, to sit with it, to get photographed with it. So it really makes you think. People are frightened of art galleries. They're intimidating. So, before we even started, I consider that a successful, kind of intervention. The next day, we took it out and dropped it off at the side of the road. This is on the Trans-Canada heading north out of Halifax. And within 2 minutes, this couple pulled over. They're going camping in New Brunswick to one of the national parks. And so they just took it. And that was it. We waved goodbye, so we don't travel with the bot. We're not, following it. We're not checking in on it other than online. It has GPS. It can update a map and let us know where it is. And it also takes photos, and it posts its photos as well. So this is what came in. Like in the first day, here it is. It's somebody figured it should have a bowel movement. They tucked it in for the night. They fed it. It was raining. I guess it was talking too much. They left it outside, and they bought it a poncho. There's some other thing. I'm skipping some stuff, but I'm kind of going to give you some of the highlights here. This is the Anishinaabe First Nations Powwow on Manitoulin Island. hitchBOT wound up at this because it was picked up by somebody, I believe, leaving. It had a repair pit stop at Colin's house. Somebody dropped it off on its way through Ontario. The next family that picked it up were on their way to this powwow. And when they got there, hitchBOT was received as a guest of honor. And they had an official naming ceremony for it, which is, it is an honor. And they named it Iron Woman. So hitchBOT has a female voice. We hadn't ascribed a gender to it, but after this, all of the kind of like earrings, jewelry, you know, people started to give it things. This is a wedding. This is the happy father of the bride. hitchBOT's, I think, is dancing on the shoulders of the groom. We started at this point to start to get invitations from airlines, ferries, you know. So BC Ferries was interested in having hitchBOT on board. And it was in the bridge. This is the, it always seems to go places where no one can go anymore, you know, for security reasons, right? So the cockpits of airplanes, you know, the pilot house of the ferry. Arriving in Vancouver Island, hitchBOT was received by the Salish First Nations. It received an official welcome to First Nations territory in the long canoe. So they actually paddled it into Victoria Harbour. Here it's being greeted by First Nations elders. And there's more actually to tell about this, which I'll get to. hitchBOT having high tea at the Empress. I saw, like on Twitter, the Empress invited, you know, said to hitchBOT, well, you know, we have a room already for you. And so I phoned, because we had to go to Victoria, you know, to collect hitchBOT. And I phoned them up. I said, do you really, you know, can I stay in hitchBOT's room? And they said, oh, we were just kidding. So, but they said, we do have a sister hotel that, you know, we'll get you a room. So hitchBOT started to actually pay back at this point. And in Victoria, now this is the reception at the gallery, the open space gallery. Colin is here with us helping to present. Now, if you remember from the Halifax gallery, like you could hear a pin drop, there was standing room only. They were turning people away at the door. The gallery was absolutely packed. So somehow we did something, you know, with this idea of audiences and exhibitions by, you know, kind of setting something loose into public. So by the time we started, with, you know, with just a few followers on Twitter, what was it, 3.5 weeks, we'd gone from there to 28,000. I think we're up in the high 30s, 40,000 at this point. And Twitter followers are, you know, kind of retweeting, but there's a high number of original tweets from the followers. So people are actually responding, you know, producing impressions, you know, attempting to communicate with hitchBOT, basically talking about robots. So there's data that can be analyzed there. Facebook, this one post reached 50,000 people. 68,000 was most people reached with a single post. Facebook now, hitchBOT is achieved celebrity status. It now has, if you look at its Facebook site, it says public figure. The Twitter stats, let's go through a couple things here. Yeah, and video, so Instagram and video, etc. So, what's next? Of course, you know, we went to California. We were awarded the Top Innovators Award at the Silicon Valley Innovation Conference. Steve Wozniak, the co-founder of Apple, was keynote alongside hitchBOT. And also Steve Chu, who's the, I think he's a Nobel Prize winning scientist formerly with Park. We didn't even get to the Germany stuff, but I think what I should do is end it there. I think that was part of the people love a story, they love drama, and I think the fact that there was the risk that something might happen caused people to invest in it. You know, it was vulnerable, and I think people liked the idea of looking after something that was vulnerable. There was an interesting thing that did happen in Germany, which was that we were kind of adopted and sponsored by a network to come over because they wanted to make a documentary. And what happened was they began to orchestrate a little bit too intensively, like kind of, you know, micromanaging hitchBOT. And there started to become a movement on Twitter, you know, where it was called kidnap hitchBOT. And basically the idea was to rescue it out of the hands of the media, you know, to kind of let it go off and do its own thing again. So from that point of view, yeah, there was some people that were, you know, you could see starting to plot for ways that they could look it up and find it on the map and go snatch it and make sure that the television crew didn't get it back again. There was also some, you know, kind of ill-considered and rather rude stuff that was happening. Who are those guys? Silent Bob. You know, he's a film star from Kevin Smith. Yeah, he's kind of a bad boy. So kind of like doing a Howard Stern number on hitchBOT. So how much thought and how much money? Right? That's a really expensive robot. Ours is really cheap. We actually put a lot of thought into it. This is one of Frauke's areas of specialty is you know, the design of a robot. It's important that you don't get to that kind of what they call the uncanny valley. If you make something that is too lifelike, too human-like, people, you know, can get you know, repulsed by that. The size of the bot, you know, that it's diminutive, you know, automatically triggers all of our empathy, you know, tendencies towards children, you know, for something that is maybe weak or needs help. And then there's the whole, you know, something should look like a robot, you know, so people that look at it immediately understand, okay, you're trying to be a robot, I get it, you know, so I think that was important. We call that the yard sale aesthetic. We had hitchBOT tweeted sometimes on its own, and you can probably, if you go through them, you can see the, you know, ones that you go, yeah, that's, you know, too simple to be a human, or too wrong, you know, to be somebody thinking about it. But for the most part, it's a Wizard of Oz scenario where we have our social media people tweeting, because for the most part, hitchBOT is running into never anticipated situations. You know, like, oh, I'm here and really there is something that it needs to be at in a couple days. Is there anybody that can help it do that? Or can I thank so-and-so who just did something, you know, like to help me repair or something. We did have an instance where hitchBOT early last summer, just a couple days after it went out, it tweeted something bad. And, you know, people immediately, there was a flood of stuff in social media saying, are you drunk? You know, and we, you know, we kind of went, and that's because the clever script program we're using comes with clever data. And that means that this company has accumulated tons and tons of conversation modeling from all the people that have been playing with the program. So there was stuff in there about the devil and, you know, like a lot of kind of American fundamentalist, you know, kind of conversation in there that we didn't realize until recently that we can suppress that. You can actually flag certain terms and say, don't ever say this. But it started to go to the dark side a little bit. So we, well, two things. One thing that I would say touched me the most was we started to get a lot of communication from parents with autistic kids. Now, and again, when we talk about the scientific, you know, this idea of, you know, throwing something up in the air and seeing what happens, this is another area that I think has been explored, the relationship between autism and technology, and the interest some autistic children have in technology. Autistic kids loved hitchBOT. We were getting, you know, these communications from parents. And I got one picture. There was a girl sitting, an 8-year-old girl sitting in a lawn chair at the end of her driveway. And I guess her parents had come out and taken the picture from behind. And they sent it to us, said, this is our autistic daughter waiting for hitchBOT to come by. And, hitchBOT was already on the other side of the country by then, and I just went, oh, And we did have also in Victoria, a parent of an autistic child said, can my child come and meet hitchBOT? She can't handle a crowd, so would it be possible if she comes before the reception? We said, sure, so we showed up an hour early. And then there was that sold out event. Her daughter stayed through the whole thing. The other thing that was interesting was at that reception in Victoria, an older gentleman came up to me and said, I've just hitchhiked across the country. And I was exactly, a day behind hitchBOT. And he said, I got at least 2 rides from people that said they never pick up hitchhikers. And they were talking about the reason why they decided to was because of this. Just kind of considering what their feelings were about it. What were the chances that something bad was going to happen to them? So that was interesting. If you go back to my original idea about public safety, perceptions of public safety, the overwhelming likelihood and odds that most people you run into are good. It's only really rare that that you're going to be subject to bad things happening. Two concrete initiatives that are coming out of this, and then kind of address the question more generally. The First Nations, the Salish First Nations people, they were really interested in the relationship, the kind of universal age appeal of the robotics project. So elders were really, really interested in. These are people that maybe don't use computers, don't have cell phones or Skype accounts and stuff. We're really, really interested in this idea of the animate machine. And kids, of course, were just fascinated, because they kind of have that willing suspension of disbelief. And what we began to talk about was the possibility of using a conversational robot in the transmission of endangered First Nations languages. They have their entire Salish language already digitized. It's in a database. They've got it all categorized according to parts of speech, phrases, definitions. That's already there and available. They're looking for applications that they can test that might facilitate transmission, because that's a problem. That's how the language will die out if it doesn't become spoken. So how can contemporary media technologies become part of that transmission? So if you think about a social media conversational robot that can tweet in Salish, that people can take pictures and caption in Salish, and that people can try to teach it to understand in Salish, now maybe you've got something that can help accelerate interest and maybe be effective. So that's probably a SHIRK 3-year partnership development grant. So we'll be going for that next year to apply for that. We've also been contacted by the aerospace industry for long-term companionable robots that are also useful, like they might be doing monitoring activity, biometrics, even face recognition, determining what kind of a mood is this person in? Can I respond, with humor? Can I ask questions? Or do you want me to be, more of service to you and take a message dictation or something like that? So that was a complete surprise to us, because I'm coming from the humanities, the arts, cultural studies, communication studies. And we're talking to people who are rocket scientists, who are industrial designers, who are, computer programmers, and they're going, we see that you are doing something that we need, that will complement what we do. So it's a perfect example. With the medical stuff, there are people, I don't know if you've seen these things, but there's one that actually you can do a telepresence robot. So a specialist, say a dermatologist, needs to be on call, you know, to be able to check out, you know, people's allergic reactions in hospital, et cetera. They might not be able to get every place that they need to be. Some specialists are rare and overworked. The idea of having you know, a robot that, you know, is mobile, that actually can see, and that the patient can see, oh, there's a person. It's like a mobile Skype almost, you know. Maybe that's going to be more acceptable if it also has arms. You know, the anthropomorphic you know, signaling is really important. The idea of something, you know, being presence as another kind of social presence is important.